guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. We messed up last week. I regretfully apologize to all of our faithful subscribers. We dropped the ball. We did not get you a Form Check Friday last Friday, and for that, we will forever be sorry. But today, we do have a Form Check for you, a Form Check Friday for you. So we're gonna dive right into it. Our first submission comes from Kevin Dornbreyer. Now, Kevin is from Switzerland. He was actually here on a business trip not long ago. We got a chance to hook up for a session, went over some of his lifts. Now, as you can see here, his squat looks pretty darn good. That was one of the things we were able to work on while we were here. I think we may have touched on his deadlift, but he says that since then, things have kind of regressed, slipped a little bit, and he wanted me to take a look at it for him. One of the things being that he feels his hips are too high. Now, I would agree. He says that if he sits his hips down too much, his shoulders get behind the bar, and then he's in a really, really tough position to start off the floor. The biggest thing I would say is not necessarily to sit your hips down, but to try to shift your whole body back behind the bar just slightly. We want to bring those shoulders back so they're a little bit more in line with the bar. Right now you're a little out in front of the bar. And the other thing that I would recommend trying to do is be a little bit more patient in making it a push off the floor. What's happening is we're seeing those hips come up behind you, especially as you fatigue and progress throughout the set. We're seeing more and more of that hip raise and more and more of it turning into more of a stiff leg kind of pattern. We want to try to avoid that and keep the hips where you set them for the initiation and the first phase of the movement. We really want to try and work harder on making it a push and not seeing those hips come up behind you. Our next submission comes from Sven. Now, first off, Sven sent in some squats, and he's wondering if his back angle or the amount of lean that he's getting in his squats is too much. Now, you'll notice that it is a fair amount of lean for the movement, but Sven also has a very low bar position. So I would argue, and I would say that what you're doing here, Sven, is good. The amount of lean you've got is totally fine. We're still seeing everything line up like it should, and we're not getting out in front of the bar, we're not behind the bar, and you're doing a relatively good job of maintaining your torso angle throughout. So I don't think it's too much lean. I think it's warranted given your bar position. Now with Sven's deadlifts, however, first thing worth noting, Sven is Croatian, which is cool, but also Dylan is Croatian, and it seems like they have the same leverages, and those leverages kind of suck for conventional deadlifts, unfortunately. Now, a couple things that we can do, however, is, like I recommended for Kevin, try to get back just a little bit. Hip height, you're relatively high with your hips, not inherently an issue, but we're getting a little bit out in front of the bar, ever so slightly, and I'd like you to try and get back so we can get those shins out of the way mostly. Because right now, from the foot, we got a little bit too much dorsiflexion. We're a little closed in that foot and shin angle. If we can open that up a little bit by getting your whole body back, we'll get those shins out of the way so you can keep the bar a little bit closer to your center of gravity throughout the initiation of the movement. Hopefully that helps you, my man. All right, guys, so next up, we got some more deadlifts. These ones come from Elijah. Now, Elijah, unfortunately, this is a little rough, man. We're committing a number of faults here. The first one being really jacking into the bar, not setting tension before initiating the movement. Now, some guys, like I've said before, definitely get away with it, but it can be really, really tough to replicate properly. One of the biggest things that this is causing for you is it's causing you to lose external rotation in your hips, and your knees are starting to cave in, which is going to put a little bit of stress on your knees, it's going to put a little bit of stress on your hips, it's going to put a little bit of stress on your back. So it's going to cause a number of problems that may or may not be workable, but what I would recommend is taking a step back with the loads that you're working with and try to dial things in a little bit more. Let's get you to be a little bit slower and more intentional off the floor. Let's get you to work on keeping those knees out where you set them when you start so that we don't see them collapse as you initiate the movement. And the other thing I'd like you to try and do is just be a little bit more patient off the floor. Just be a little bit more intentional. Try to pull the slack out of the bar. And what I mean by that is leverage yourself against the bar, and before you start pulling, I want you to feel tension in your lats, low back, all the way around your abs and obliques, your glutes, your hamstrings, and your quads. Light weights should actually float if you do this right. And if you're not getting that when you're warming up, maybe take some more time. We did a really comprehensive sumo video. I explained it pretty in depth in that, and just try to use some of those cues a little bit more in your deadlift. Hopefully that helps you, buddy. Let's move on to the next one. Now, our next submission, also a deadlift. I'm noticing a trend here, comes from Paul. Now, Paul, the biggest thing that I'm seeing here, man, is a little bit of rounding in your back as you start to get the weight off the floor. Even in your setup, I think we can get more extension. Try playing around with how tight your belt is. A lot of people, I'm noticing, can get a really nice, good, solid back angle without the belt. They can feel it. Their proprioception's a lot better. As soon as they put the belt on and crank it down, we're seeing a lot more of that rounding. And it feels similar because you're having that added stimulus of cranking the belt down on yourself. So what I want you to try to do is play around with that. Let's try to get more back extension. Another thing that could help is maybe widening your stance a tiny bit, trying to get your knees, your hips externally rotated to push your knees out of the way a little bit, and in maybe narrowing the grip. Again, to try to limit the range of motion and allow you to go from here to a little bit more of an upright start position, ideally getting that last little bit of extension out of that back. Now, I think if we can lock those things in, start with more of an extended back, and make sure that the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, etc., are doing more of the work, then you're not going to feel like you're having trouble getting your legs involved, like you said in your email. So if we can stabilize the spine and keep it rigid and unmoving throughout, instead of using the spine to actually extend to pull the bar through to finish, then I think you're going to find what you're looking for. You're going to stay further away from injury. So let's try those things out. And if those don't work and you absolutely can't get your back flat, maybe try sumo. Just a thought. Not saying that's the answer, but in a lot of cases, in clients of mine who have had a hard time getting into a good conventional position, sometimes even training sumo for a period of time will allow you to then feel a better back angle. You go back to conventional, you can maintain that back angle. You now know what you're looking for in terms of the feeling of it. That can help. Give it a shot. Let me know how it goes for you, buddy. Our final video for today comes from Patrick, and Patrick is here doing some squats. He says he's working on my 16-week program. He really likes it. So shout out to you, Patrick. I'm glad you're digging it. I'm glad you checked the program out, and I hope it provides you a lot of gains. Now, Patrick said he was noticing that his bar path, he's trying to get it straight up and down. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's the be-all and end-all of a good squat. I think if you analyze a lot of top-level lifters, we're not seeing necessarily straight up and down. That's just not how the body moves all the time. Otherwise, Smith machine squats would be perfect for everybody. It's just not the case. But I digress. One thing that I am noticing that would coincide with your observations of your bar path deviating would be that as you reach the bottom of your squat, everything's really collapsing forward in the bottom. So the weight's shifting to your toes, your knees are shifting forward, your hips are shifting forward, your upper back is collapsing just a little bit. So one thing I would try to get you to do is keep that weight more evenly distributed through your feet throughout the entirety of the lift, especially in the very bottom when you use the stretch reflex to change directions. When you loosen, I want you to think about not letting yourself bounce forward. I want you to think about trying to keep everything more straight up and down, push back into your hips ever so slightly to get a little bit more stretch from the hips, and hopefully that will keep you from bouncing onto your toes as you get back up into the sticking point of the movement. Now, I know for myself, that's something that I've struggled with for a long time, is trying to stay off the toes. And one of the things that I have done in the past and still find myself doing on the odd rep is as I get to the bottom, instead of just coming down and then back up, I'll come down and then forward and back up. Now, two things can happen when we bounce too far forward. We either come up too far forward or we bounce forward and then we overcompensate, kicking the butt way up, knees way back, and we get into sort of a squat morning position. Whereas if we can be a little bit smoother in terms of our weight distribution in a frontal plane, more straight up and down, then that's going to allow us to better compensate and use more efficient mechanics to move the bar, ideally staying further away from either of those faults in a better squat. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. Hopefully everybody who's been featured, everybody that I've emailed back, and everybody who's watched this video has been able to take something away from it and improve their technique, stay further from injury, and closer to a more efficient technique. I just want to give a quick mention here. We filmed a tattoo video. We've had a lot of questions on the channel about my tattoos, what they are, what they represent, etc. So we actually put together a video that might turn into a series, so let us know what you guys think when you check that one out. We also are coming to a close with Nash and Arnold's. We'll have a really sweet competition video for you and a recap of Nationals coming up within a week of finishing, or within a week of competing at Nationals, and we'll do everything that we can to get some footage from the Arnold and make a cool video for that as well. So a couple of big things coming to a head here, culmination of a lot of work, and hopefully you guys are enjoying what we're doing. That's about it for me. Leave a like if you liked it, comment below if you have any questions or other suggestions for these lifters I've featured today, and we'll see you guys in the next video.